Hello, and welcome to Introduction to Bioinformatics Analysis, taught by Philip Richmond. In section 1-3A, we are going to be exploring the Linux environment. So quick start instructions, I'll have these in the next couple sets of slides. Essentially, in order to open your terminal, you can remember we can, on Mac, simply find the terminal application and open it like that. If you are on a PC, then you need to open up a MOBA Xterm session, and if you don't remember how to do that, then look up the instructions on the course website. So I open up my terminal, I've made the font size a bit larger, and I want to now log in to the Westgrid server. So I type SSH, my username, at orcanis.westgrid.ca. Type in my password, and voila, I am now logged in. So a quick foreword for this, I will only give you a brief introduction to the shell. There are still many things that I don't know, and I've been working in bioinformatics and computational biology for about 6 years, and Google is still one of the best resources to find things. For more detailed Linux command line tutorials, there are lots of them out there. You can find them on YouTube or Google, and you'll have plenty to play with. I've linked a couple different options on the course website. Some lingo that I'll be using. So as it pertains to Linux, when I say directory, I'm talking about like a folder. It can hold files or other directories. A file path. This is a term that describes the location of a file or directory within a server's file system. So the file system you can think of as the collection of all files on a given server. Every full file path starts at the root, and I'll go over that in just a minute. And command line is where the user interacts with the server. So when I say command line, I'm talking about this right here, this gray block. And so you can see it starts with some bracketed information, user at host, the directory that I'm in, we'll go over that in a minute, and then this $sign. Now again, remember when I show you the $sign, that's not something I want you to actually type in. That's just letting you know that what is coming is a command for you to type in. Another thing to notice is that there is no clicking with the mouse. In order to navigate, you can only use the keyboard. You can still do some copy-paste within this space, but other than that, the mouse is pretty much only used for scrolling. When it comes to copying and pasting, never try to copy-paste from the slides. Always retype the commands yourself. Also, everything is case-sensitive, so make sure that you are not using capitalizations when it comes to Linux commands, as well as if you name a file with capital letters, then you need to make sure that when you reference that file, you use the same capitalization. So, let's explore where we are on the server. Your first command we're going to run is print working directory, or pwd. So if I type pwd, then it lets me know where I am. So my current working directory, where I am on the server, is, we read it from left to right, /home/ and every time there's a new slash, that's letting you know that you're in a different directory, Richmond P. So reading from left to right, again, this is what we call the root, the first directory, and then the second directory. So a file system hierarchy, much like your own computer, the server has a directory hierarchy to it. On a Mac, you can think of these as options in Finder like desktop and documents, or even higher up than that, users on a given machine. The very highest point of this hierarchy is called the root, and like a tree, the hierarchy has branches that all stem from this single point. So where we are in /home/richmondp, you would read this as slash, if this was home, /richmondp. That's where you are on the file system. So why don't we explore the different parts of this file system hierarchy? We can start by using the change directory command, or cd. So if we type cd for change directory, and then we want to change into the root directory, which we can simply use a / to denote, then we are now, you can see we were in this directory, and now we are in that directory, the root. We can also check this by typing pwd again, and you can see this time, instead of getting our home directory when we type pwd, we now are returned just the root. So we can list out the contents of a current working directory by typing the command list, or ls. So if we type ls without anything after it, then it will list out the different files and directories in our current working directory. So the vast majority of these files and directories at the root we will probably never actually interact with. One of the things that you might notice right off the bat is that these have all different colors to them. There's this light blue, the dominant dark blue, and then this black and green. And so we'll go over what those different colors are when we talk about file permissions a bit later. So why don't we explore the /home directory? Now we can change into this directory a couple different ways. One way is to reference the full file path, which is what I recommend. So if we type cd/home, then we are telling the change directory command to go first to the root directory, and then within it go to the home directory. Alternatively, you could use the /, which would only work if we were in the root directory. The / example only works if you are referencing from the current directory that you're in onward. So if I was to type cd./home while already in the home directory, then I would not be able to find that path. Alternatively, if I went back to the root and then I typed /home, you can see that I am now in the home directory. This might be a little confusing with this specific example, but we'll reference this more later. In general, I find it's always better to use full file paths when you are navigating the server, especially when you are new to Linux. The full file path will always get you to where you want to be. So why don't we take a look at the contents of this /home directory. So remember, we can list out the contents of a directory by typing ls. So when we type ls, a whole lot of different directories get printed to the screen. And because we are in the /home directory, you can see that these are all of the users on this machine. So if we scroll around, I'm sure that we could find our own user ID. I'm here somewhere. There I am. Perfect. Another way that we can use ls is we can attach a file path to it. So if we type ls/home, we get the same response. What's nice about that is even if we weren't in this directory, we could still list out its contents. Another way that we can modify these commands that we are entering, so one way would be to specify the specific directory that we want to reference, is by adding options. So we can look at the entire list of options by typing the manual command. So if we type man ls, we are pulling up the manual for the ls command. So when I type that, you will now get this README telling you about lots of different options as well as how to use a given command. So we can scroll up and down within this README using the up and down arrow keys, and then when we are done reading this README, we can escape by hitting Q, just the letter Q. So we can pull up the last command that we ran, this man ls, by just hitting up on the arrow keys. You can see that if we hit up or down, we can navigate our most recent commands. This way, if you enter a command and you want to enter it again in the exact same way, you can literally just scroll up and down through the list of your commands. So again, if we type man ls, we can see that there are lots of different options, and one of the options that we can add is the -l option. So if we scroll down and we want to see what -l does, -l, lowercase l that is, will use the long listing format. So again, we hit Q to escape out of there. We can type ls-l, and now instead of just having the directory names printed, what will be printed to the screen is a lot more information, an entire line per directory. So ls-l by default will sort alphabetically, which is why we have these Z's and Y's. And again, I'm scrolling up and down using my mouse here, which is pretty much, again, one of the main things you can actually use a mouse for in the terminal. And you see that there's a bit of information that's printed out about each of these directories. So why don't we break down this line of information? So I've found mine. If we scroll up to my directory, we can see these are the things that have been used. So this line is pretty much copied here. And so this first bit we'll walk through deals with permissions. The D stands for directory, and the rest we're going to go over later in the permission section in the advanced Linux usage. This, I'm actually not sure what exactly this is, and it does not matter for the time being. More on that later, I suppose. The next column is the owner of the file, and then the next column is the file creator group. The size of the file in bytes, and so when this is a directory, this size is almost always going to be 4 kilobytes. The date at which and time at which it was created, and then lastly the name of the directory itself. So let's say we want to go back to our home directory. There are a number of ways that we can get there. One way is we can type the full file path. So if we type that full file path, cd/home/our username, we are now back in the home directory. Again, we can check to make sure we're in the right place with the pwd, and this is where we started at, and this is the right spot. Another way is by typing the tilde. So if we type cd tilde / that will also take us to our home directory. And lastly, if you just type cd without anything, that will also take you to the home directory. So there are lots of ways to go home. We are going to now make our first file, and we're going to do this using the echo command. So just for posterity, we will type echo and then in quotes, hello world. And so what this is going to do is echo literally says print to the screen whatever I have in the quotation marks. So if I type echo hello world, then the server will print to me hello world. This printing to the screen is also called printing to the standard out. This is a very important concept, the idea that whatever is being printed to the screen is printed to a place called the standard out. We can capture the standard out instead of printing to the screen using the greater than character. So if we run the same command, remember you can either retype the command or just hit up arrow, hello world. And this time, instead of just entering the command and printing to the screen, we will type greater than, and then we will type the name of a file. So we can call this file hello world.txt. And you can see this time nothing printed to the standard out. Instead, it was captured into this file called hello world.txt. Something to mention is that there is no going back. Once you enter in a command, the server will execute it. So if you overwrite existing files, there will be no warnings. For example, if we already had a file called hello world.txt and we were to run this command, then the old file would be deleted and this new file would be created. We can list out the file that we just made by typing ls and then the name of the file, and you can see that there is the file. Also, if you just type ls, it'll list everything in the directory. A lot of these things you won't have in your directory yet. You probably have mostly a blank directory, but you can see this is where that file is. Also, if you recall, ls-l will print out in long format, and we can see that this was created on June 20th at 2:54 p.m. A very important thing that we can do is we can save off our history. And so you can save the history for your session, i.e. all the commands that you've entered, by typing the history command. So if I type history and then hit enter, you can see that it has printed all of the things that I have done on this server. Now, my list is several hundred things long. Yours probably is maybe a dozen. So this is a nice resource that we can use to perhaps go back and rerun a command that we ran earlier. Let's say I wanted to run this command over again. Now this is not too useful for short commands, but for an example, as commands get longer, like this command here, then this is something that you're going to want to be able to rely on. So again, by typing history, we print to the standard out. And just like before, we can capture that standard out with the greater than symbol. So history greater than, we want to save it to a file called history.txt. Again, this time when we printed it out, you can see nothing came to the screen, but if we do an ls-l, we can see there is a history file created June 20th at 2:57. We can take a look at what's in our history.txt file using the more command. So if we type more history.txt, then we are now looking at the top of the history file. You can see that this is only showing us a full screen's worth, and if we hit the enter button, then it will scroll down one line at a time, or if we hit the space bar, then it will scroll down one page at a time. So scrolling through, you can see all of the commands that you've run, and if we want to exit the more space, we can hit Q. So there are many different ways to look at the contents of a file. Three of the most popular ones are more, less, and concatenate, or cat. So if we use the less command on our history.txt file, you can see that this time, instead of not being able to scroll back up, we can use the arrow keys to move up and down within this file. In order to exit this space, we can also use the Q command, Q button. And lastly, we can concatenate, or cat, history.txt. Now what this does is it will print everything to the screen, which is going to come in handy later. So if we type cat history, you can see, if we scroll up, that everything within the file was printed to the screen instantaneously. So next we're going to make a directory. So we are going to make a directory called history by typing mkdir history. You can see for me, I've already created this directory, so it doesn't work. So I am going to make a history2 directory. And you can type this by typing mkdir, the make directory command, and then the name of the directory that you want to make. Also, you could use full file path when you are making your directories. And remember that this will save you some headaches later on. Now we are going to move our history.txt file into the directory that we just created using the move command, mv. So if we type mv history.txt, we can move that into the directory history, or for me, history2. Now if we type ls, the history file that used to be here is now gone. mv can also be used to rename a file. So we can add a date to this file. But since this file is now in the history directory, we have to first change into that directory. We can type ls to find our file, and then we can use mv to change the name of that file to history underscore some date. June 30th is my mother's birthday. History underscore June 30th, 2016.txt. Remember, you cannot use the / characters in file names, and you really want to avoid spaces. Spaces will only give you headaches. I highly recommend underscores instead of spaces if you need to separate out a file name. So why don't we copy this history file back into our home directory using the copy or cp command. So why don't we practice with full file paths here? So if we type cp /home, our username, history2, and you can see that I hit the tab button and it auto-completed the entire line. If you hit tab and there is a file that is named something that you've started typing, then it will auto-complete the rest of that file name and then add a space. So you can see I want to copy the file, this file, and then I want to give it a destination. So why don't we move it to /home/richmondp. Again, with the tab complete, I'll just show you this quickly. If I am typing RI or even RIC, and I hit tab, you notice nothing happens. But if I hit tab twice, then it will show me all of my options that start with RIC. So if I then add an H and hit tab twice, I have fewer options. An M, even fewer options. And then as soon as I hit O, because that then becomes a unique character, it will auto-complete the rest. And I want to rename this file history1.txt. So I'm copying from this file at this destination to this file at this destination. So this file doesn't exist. When I type the cp command, I'm going to create that file. So if I hit enter, then you can see it doesn't really look like anything happened, but if I go back to my home directory and I type ls, we can see that that file now exists in my home directory. And lastly, I'm going to show you the remove command. So the remove command is really an end-all, no prisoners, no going back command. You need to use it with caution. So first we are going to change into our home directory. I'm already there. We checked to make sure we had our history1.txt file, which we did. And then we're going to delete it permanently. So we can type rm history again. So if I hit tab here or double tab, it's going to show me the options, but as soon as I type 1, that becomes a unique file. So if I hit that, are you sure you want to move ahead with this? You can type yes, and now if we type ls, history1 is gone. The other cool things that I talk about, tab complete, which I've just recently talked about, clear will clear the screen. Very nice to have a clean working screen, and you can always scroll up and down. You can also change your relative file path using .. So if I type cd .. that will move me back a directory. So if I am in the home directory and I type pwd and then I type cd .. it'll move me back one. So now I'm just in /home. I can move back one even further, and now I am in the root. So just real quickly, the key commands to know from this section: ls, cd, clear, pwd, mv, rm, and man. I recommend using the Unix cheat sheet. All of these commands are on that cheat sheet, and it is something that definitely is going to save you a lot of headaches if you get used to using the cheat sheet while you are working in the Linux environment.